we noted that the one word that's repeated over and over again in Genesis chapter 1 to describe creation is good. In fact, by the time we get to the end, creation is very good. It is exactly what God was going for. But then we have to face the reality that life is hard, and life can times just be difficult beyond measure. And 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, it was even more difficult with rampant plague and sickness and food shortages and infant mortality rates approaching 90%. It's a very, very difficult time to live. So how do you deal with that? Where does the badness of this world come from if creation was actually created good? Well, the Bible deals with that in the story in Genesis 3, a story that's most often been deemed the fall, where the man and the woman are in the garden. God gives them just simple rules to live by. Actually, we commented that they did have a rule to live by in paradise. They could not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Exactly what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a question. By the way, the tradition of it being an apple is connected because the word for apple and the word for evil in Latin are very, very close. And so, well, see, it's obviously an apple. But the tree of the knowledge of good and evil really could mean probably three things. It can either be that they can now know the difference between good and evil, that prior to this they had sort of a naive way of living. The second possibility is they could define for themselves now what is good and what is evil, that they can know how to define good and evil for themselves. And the third would be, it would be a sort of an inclusive Hebrew phrase. In other words, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil would be the tree of the knowledge of everything from good to evil. In other words, the knowledge of everything. That's the purpose of the tree. What the options are, well, that's a matter of interpretation, and we can talk about some of the implications of that in class. It is interesting that the first thing they do with the newfound knowledge that they get is to do something stupid. They make clothes out of leaves. Leaves are not exactly conducive for clothing. I'm going to assume none of you have any clothing made out of leaves. I guess you're a Lady Gaga fan. You probably have some clothes made out of leaves, but most of us don't have clothes made out of leaves. And they also hide. I will say that historically the woman has gotten the more share of the blame. It was her fault more than others. But I do think there are reasons to call that blame into question. I don't know that she is the one that is completely to blame. But they both have exactly the same punishment, at least in terms of the ancient Near Eastern perspective. Man gets increased difficulty in his labor. Women gets increased difficulty in her labor. In both cases, there was always going to be work, and apparently childbirth was always going to be difficult. But now work is really going to be hard, and childbirth is really going to be hard. I do think it's significant that the word for curse is not used in Hebrew for the man or the woman. Only two things in this passage are cursed. The serpent is cursed, and the ground is cursed. And I think that's an important rhetorical choice. Curses usually have that sense of sort of a permanent prohibition. They are punished. They've done what was wrong, and they are punished. But to say they live under the curse makes it a little stronger than the Bible does. The Bible chooses not to use that word. But of course the consequences are they are banished from Eden and that idyllic lifestyle. Their hubris has alienated them from God. Hubris is excessive pride or arrogance. They decided that they wanted to call their own shots. They were tired of having to rely on God for knowledge of good and evil, whatever that means. They wanted to have that for themselves, and so they decided they could do that and be independent of God. The image has now decided to not reflect the original anymore. The mirror has decided to go its own way, and that's the consequence we get. They have now alienated themselves from God, and in reality, every sin is just that, deciding that you know better for your life than God does, and it goes all the way back to the garden.